Tonight, quarantined passengers express frustration over the Territory Government's handling of the Sydney hotspot declaration. A man is sentenced over the death of a young boy who fell from the back of a moving caravan near Katherine. Calls for greater scrutiny over a $2 million land deal involving the Northern Territory Government. And red centre rains transform the usually dry Todd River bed into a flowing waterway. Good evening, Eleni Roussos with ABC News. The Northern Territory Government says it will pay for the return flights of travellers caught out yesterday when Greater Sydney was declared a coronavirus hotspot. The news comes as the Uluru-Katajuta National Park is closed, while health authorities race to test people who flew from Sydney to Yulara.
Just a day after they arrived, some Sydney travellers were today back at the airport after having a mandatory sleepover at the Howard Springs Quarantine Centre. They're flying south again after Greater Sydney was declared a hotspot mid-flight on Sunday. The arrivals only told after they landed that they wouldn't be spending Christmas with family and friends in the top end.
I was devastated and really frustrated, I guess, sort of once worked out what it actually meant. It was the worst news that you can probably receive after landing.
About 140 arrivals were sent to quarantine facilities yesterday and had to quickly decide whether they'd spend Christmas in isolation or find a flight back south.
At that stage, they were telling us that obviously quarantine's free as it changed while we were in the air, but no offering of to book our flights or any word of whether they would be covered.
The government today clarified it will cover the cost of return flights, but many are angry the hotspot was declared with such little notice.
Realising that people on planes just a few hours earlier were still able to self-isolate and get off the plane and not get shipped straight here to the quarantine facility just was so frustrating.
We don't have the ability to control flight schedules. We make the decision based on the advice when we're provided that.
The government says it's doubled the capacity of the coronavirus testing clinic at Royal Darwin Hospital and tripled staffing on the coronavirus hotline after wait times blew out to more than 2 hours. In Central Australia, Uluru-Katajuta National Park has been closed at the request of traditional owners who say an agreement about flights has been broken.
We had the agreement that no planes from a hotspot would land directly in Yulara, and the plane this morning couldn't be stopped by Voyagers.
She says about 200 recent arrivals will need to be tested, with the park's closure expected to affect the Cosmic Consciousness Conference, a sold-out event timed with the summer solstice.
Uluru is the solar plexus of the world, the healing centre of the planet.
We haven't organised this ceremony. It has nothing to do with the Mudurjulu community, so I hope people will respect that and just do their own thing within the rules of the park and not enter Mudurjulu.
The government says a health team has been flown to Yulara to test arrivals, and 4 people who had spent time in Sydney's northern beaches will be transferred to Alice Springs tomorrow. Nicholas Hines, ABC News.
Sydney's Northern Beaches cluster continues to grow with another 15 new infections. The New South Wales Premier has again pleaded with people across Greater Sydney to wear a mask when out and about. And the Health Minister has blasted people using fake names when checking into venues. State political reporter Ashley Raper reports.
A different kind of patrol on Manly Beach. Police move people on as everybody on the northern beaches is under a public health order to stay home. The lockdown continues on the peninsula and the rest of Sydney is on edge.
Trains were empty and looks like all the streets are deserted.
Last week there were people coming to work, the bus was full. This morning the bus only had about 4 people on it, so it's certainly a huge transition over the weekend.
There are 15 new cases, all are linked to the Avalon cluster, which has now reached 83. And that cluster has caused outbreaks outside of the northern beaches, at a hair salon on the North Shore, a pub in the inner west, and an office in the CBD.
What we want to do is make sure that there is no further spread from those clusters outwards.
Testing has hit an all-time high. 38,000 people were swabbed yesterday. But there is concern that health officials can't trace everybody impacted by the cluster.
Some of the visitors to various venues still think that it's funny to be putting in there that you're Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse, and thinking it's smart to call yourself Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse is about as stupid as it gets.
Tighter restrictions came into effect in Sydney today, including limiting home visitors to 10 people. And while not enforced, the health advice to not visit aged care homes and wear masks was repeated.
We will be monitoring the uptake of mask wearing. The sites that we're particularly concerned about is indoor venues. So when you're going into an indoor venue, please wear a mask.
Other state premiers have had a bit to comment about what we're doing in New South Wales, but I'm confident the strategies we have in place are working.
The Premier remains adamant that she won't make a decision on the rules for Christmas Day until Wednesday. Authorities are looking at two main things: the spread on the northern beaches and whether the virus has made its way to other parts of Sydney and can't be directly linked to the Avalon cluster.
2020 is not done with us yet, that's very clear. And nor should we be surprised. The events of the past few days, I have no doubt, are incredibly frustrating and disappointing.
The green light has been given to people from Sydney who don't live on the northern beaches to travel to regional New South Wales. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
And Ashley Raper joins me now. Ashley, there's still a big question mark over Christmas Day celebrations. The Premier must be under immense pressure to ease restrictions a little by Friday.
Yes, Eleni, she certainly is. There is so much uncertainty here in Sydney, and that's not lost on the Premier. Gladys Berejiklian today acknowledged the frustration people are feeling, but insists the situation is still simply too volatile to make a call just yet. The question everybody wants answered is how many people will be allowed in a home for Christmas lunch or dinner, and for those living on the northern beaches, whether they'll be allowed to leave their home and see anybody at all. But there is a lot at stake, and the Premier says she's weighing up the need for people to be with their families on Christmas Day after a really tough year, while not put the state at risk because this outbreak isn't contained.
Ashley Raper, thank you. A scathing final report into Victoria's hotel quarantine program has found the ill-fated scheme was plagued by a breakdown in government procedure. But the inquiry wasn't able to work out who made the fateful decision to use private security guards, the critical failure that triggered Victoria's deadly second wave. Elias Kluwer reports.
It was a day of reckoning for the Premier and his government.
I am sorry, we are sorry. Our commitment and my commitment as the Leader of the Government is to learn those lessons.
The lessons were spelled out in the 350-page final report from the hotel quarantine inquiry. On the critical decision to use private security, former Judge Jennifer Coate said the decision was made without proper analysis or even a clear articulation that it was being made at all. And nothing in the mountain of evidence presented to the inquiry indicated who made the decision. Such a finding is likely to shock the public, Ms Coate stated. But she did say the former police chief Graham Ashton's preference to have private security rather than his own officers on the front line influenced the decision, and that there was no proper consideration of whether the ADF would have been a better option.
Justice Coate found the system was failing from the start. It never had a chance.
The Department of Health and Human Services was also criticised for not taking full responsibility for the program. The then Health Minister and Department Secretary have since resigned.
If the Secretary of the Department was still here, I'd expect that she'd be handing me her resignation today, and I would accept it. And I think the same would go for the Minister.
We hope that there'll be some improvements in this process, and that people, and in particular the department, will become more self-aware.
It's little comfort for John Damiano. He and his family were among the 18,000 Victorians who contracted COVID-19 in the second wave.
It sort of learnt their lesson, but it was a little too late, and a little too late for me and my family, and certainly for the 800 lives that were lost.
The report also found there was no oversight from senior ministers of the program. The Premier conceded that was a major flaw within his government. The opposition says it's grounds for the Premier to step aside.
Running from challenges, quitting, that cutting and run thing, that's not accountability. That's cowardice.
They're fighting words in trying times. Elias Kluwer, ABC News, Melbourne.
The world is shutting its doors to the UK in a bid to stop the spread of a new variant of coronavirus. The mutated form of COVID-19 has reached Australia. A couple of cases have been detected in hotel quarantine. Flights are still coming in from the UK, but some other countries have halted them. Europe correspondent Nick Dole reports.
Just days out from Christmas, London's Oxford Street would normally be packed, but the new strain of COVID-19 has forced a total lockdown in the British capital.
The new variant is out of control and we need to bring it under control, and this news about the new variant has been an incredibly difficult end to, frankly, an awful year.
These French travellers snared the last available train tickets and got out while they still could.
Given the situation and what is happening, we didn't want to take any risk.
A short time later, France joined a growing list of countries barring travel from the UK. It also stopped trucks carrying freight, throwing the busy cross-channel route into chaos. The new strain has already been detected on the continent, including Italy and the Netherlands, and has even reached Australian shores.
We have had a couple of UK return travellers with the particular mutations you're referring to. Can I be very clear that the Avalon cluster strain does not have those mutations?
It was first detected in England in October. While it's not believed to cause a more severe illness or be resistant to vaccines, UK modelling suggests it's up to 70% more contagious. The British government says it only became aware of just how quickly this variant could spread on Friday. It then had to perform a major U-turn after earlier assuring the public that Christmas wouldn't be cancelled.
I think it is the right decision, but I just wish it would have been made a few days earlier.
I don't like it, I really hate it, but what can we do?
But this Christmas could become even bleaker. The suspension of freight services to France is likely to make an existing logjam far worse on both sides of the channel. Presents and food suppliers will have to wait. This will be a memorable festive season, but one that many will be desperate to forget. Nick Dole, ABC News, London.
The Northern Territory's 2020 road toll has risen to 30 after a 24-year-old man died from injuries in Royal Darwin Hospital. The man was one of 4 injured in a crash in Katherine on December 10. A 19-year-old remains in a critical condition, and the 20-year-old driver has been held in custody and is facing charges over the incident. He's expected to appear in the Darwin local court in February. Meanwhile, a police road blitz continues across the NT through Christmas and the New Year to promote safe driving. A 32-year-old man has been sentenced to at least 1 year behind bars for causing the death of a young boy who fell out of a moving caravan near Katherine earlier this year. Matt Garrick reports.
8-year-old Bretson Payne's family should have been celebrating with him this Christmas. Instead, it'll be a time of heartache and loss.
It's our first Christmas without Bretston, so it's going to be hard because, you know, there's meant to be 8 of us opening presents and there's only 7 of us now.
The much-loved boy was killed after he fell out of a moving caravan as it was towed by a ute along a road at speed near Katherine in June, with several other unrestrained children inside. Bretson fell out and onto the road, where he suffered head and chest injuries, which tragically proved fatal. The man behind the wheel was Jonathan Agescu, a 32-year-old former truck driver and orchard owner, who was today sentenced in the Supreme Court after pleading guilty to dangerous driving causing death. Justice Judith Kelly saying, "You obviously did not intend the tragic consequences of your actions, but what you did was reckless in the extreme. It also breached the trust placed in you by the parents of the children who allowed you to be in their company." Justice Kelly sentenced Agescu to 3.5 years in prison to be suspended after 12 months served.
Obviously it's not enough to bring Bretson back, but as long as the defendant's behind bars, that's all we're happy about really. But the message is just that doing stupid things on the road can cause harm to little children, you know, and Breston's not coming back.
A poignant message from a family torn by grief. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
A Northern Territory doctor has been arrested over drug and firearm offences following a police operation in Nhulunbuy. Gove District Hospital Dr Tim Blake is facing 14 charges in total, including possessing a commercial quantity of a Schedule 1 dangerous drug, as well as charges relating to an unsecured firearm. NT Police say the 38-year-old was arrested in possession of several bags of methamphetamine, and a further search of his home allegedly found cocaine, meth, ketamine and prescription medicine. Police say he also returned positive tests for amphetamine and methamphetamine. He was bailed and is expected to appear in court in February. Dr Blake yesterday featured in an ABC News story about surfing in northeast Arnhem Land. The Northern Territory Government has spent a small fortune on a property in the Darwin suburb of Nucky Lagoon in a bid to resolve a long-running land use issue. The opposition wants the process scrutinised by a parliamentary committee, and a former independent MLA says the Auditor-General should examine the deal.
A slice of upmarket rural living at the heart of a secretive land deal. The government paid $1.85 million for this Nucky Lagoon property more than 6 months ago. But taxpayers who bankrolled the deal only found out last week.
Did the government purchase 5 acres of land on Stevens Road in Nucky Lagoon in April this year?
Yes, they did.
The purchase was the government's attempt to stop the site being used by a local earthworks business. A complex and pre-existing land use right meant the activity was lawful, but neighbours and politicians thought it was inappropriate for the residential rural area.
In the end, it's one of those businesses that might have been fine 20 or 30 years ago, but Nucky's Lagoon is a fairly well-established, quite, you might say, top-of-the-market residential area.
On the same day the government bought the site from a company, City Homes NT, the same company spent close to $2 million on a 3-hectare industrial site in East Arm. But there was a sweetener. The government gave the company a rent-free 5-year lease over an adjoining piece of land, theirs to own once the lease ends and certain conditions are met. The agreement meant City Homes NT got cash and land in exchange for the Nucky Lagoon site. News to Jerry Wood, who was the local member when the deal was struck.
The equation of what did it cost the taxpayer, did it cost the taxpayer any more than it should have, is really an issue that I would, if I was still a local member, I'd be writing to the Auditor-General just to ask for her to do a check on it.
The deal prompting a grilling last week about the precedent it sets.
I support the idea of moving these blocks out of these areas, there's no question about that. I'm just getting some questions about how it happened and when the next case comes up, what criteria are they going to be assessed against in relation to when they come and say, well, can you purchase my block?
This one in Stevens Road has been a long, drawn-out issue, and as I said, this was seen as a way of resolving that issue.
The government intends to sell the block in about a year to recover costs and bring a long-running planning headache to an end. Jesse Thompson, ABC News, Darwin.
Australia has been given the undesirable title of the allergy capital of the world. The issue is so serious, the government ordered a parliamentary inquiry earlier this year, which made a wide-ranging set of recommendations. Many families are eagerly awaiting the government's response due early next year, hoping their stories have been heard. Georgia Hitch reports.
Look at how many passion fruits, Mum.
Like other 9-year-olds, Xavier Cully is full of energy. What sets him apart from his peers? 15 life-threatening allergies.
I feel that we're really confident in allergy management now. We've been doing it a long time and it's our normal.
For his mother, Marquita, part of that new normal is making sure Xavier's allergies aren't seen as a burden. But that can be difficult at times. Marquita says a big challenge is the cost of safe ingredients and specialist appointments, which sometimes end up outstripping her mortgage repayments.
That should be better.
It's been a struggle financially, but we're trying to find ways around that by growing our own food and finding other ways that we can limit costs.
Oh, really? Marketa was one of hundreds of Australians who made submissions to a parliamentary inquiry into allergies earlier this year.
I do think the level of care that Zave needs and requires does make me a carer, but yet the government doesn't view it like that currently.
The inquiry's report made a long list of recommendations, including a healthcare card for people with allergies and their carers.
Wide variety of food.
Liberal MP and GP Katie Allen was part of the committee looking into the issue. For her, it's personal. She developed a peanut allergy as an adult.
To be able to work now to sort of help keep people with allergies safe and to deal with what we described for the report, which is walking the tightrope, it's immensely satisfying.
Good job. The government says it's still working on its response to the committee's report, which should be released in the next 6 weeks. While Marketa has her fingers crossed there could be changes on the horizon, it won't change her attitude to Xavier's future.
It doesn't prevent your child from doing many things that they love, everything, possibly not a cooking show, but everything else they could get involved in.
I can touch the sky!
A message his mum hopes he never forgets. Georgia Hitch, ABC News.
Australia's consumer watchdog has launched court action against Lorna Jane over clothing the brand said would protect against COVID-19. The ACCC alleges the brand knowingly made misleading claims that its garments were treated with a special substance that provided protection against viruses and pathogens, including COVID-19. The Therapeutic Goods Administration fined the company nearly $40,000 in July for unlawful advertising in relation to the garments.
If you want to make claims about a disease as serious as COVID-19, then you have to be very confident about what you are basing those claims on.
In a statement, Lorna Jane said it's extremely disappointed the Commissioner has decided to start court action and it will be defending itself against the claims. To finance now, and as expected, markets fell today on virus woes. Here's Daniel Ziffer.
Markets operate in a constant tension between greed and fear. If you've seen the news, you'll already know what won today. Shares in Australia's key index, the ASX 200, fell by 0.2% today. Logistics company WiseTech fell after an analyst report questioning recent acquisitions caused some investors to bet against the company, what's called short selling. Mining stocks were floated by rises in key commodities, but the rest of the market went backwards. The share market is not the economy, but it is a key indicator of how we're travelling. So if you think we're going to snap back to normal quickly once we've popped the champagne at New Year's Eve, look away now. Here's what happened to the value of our 200 biggest listed companies since just before the global financial crisis hit in 2008. It took until the middle of last year for the index to reach where it was 5 prime ministers ago. Global markets are crunching through to the end of the year. And the Aussie dollar is continuing the slow climb against the US dollar that it's been on throughout the year. Normally, it'd be good news for travellers, but 2020. And that's finance.
The Indigenous AFL round will return to the Northern Territory next year, with Hawthorns set to play in the top end for the first time in 3 decades. The Hawks will take on the Gold Coast Suns at Darwin's Marara Stadium in the last week of May. A week later, the Melbourne Demons will face off with the Brisbane Lions at Traeger Park in Alice Springs. Both matches fall under the Sir Doug Nicholls Indigenous round, following the success of this year's historic Dreamtime in Darwin clash between Richmond and the Bombers. AFL NT says the exact dates and times, as well as crowd numbers, will be announced in the new year. A whirlwind half-century from Dan Christian has led the Sydney Sixers thrashing of Adelaide in the BBL clash at Bellerive Oval. The Sixers recovered from a slow start through Christian's display, and their bowlers held the strikers to a modest 139. The Sixers were 3 for 58 in the 12th over when Christian arrived and began peppering the boundaries. Not even the world's #1 T20 bowler, Rashid Khan, could subdue Christian as he reached 50 off just 15 deliveries.
He's had another big swipe, and it's the same result.
His effort with the bat was complemented by taking the vital wicket of English import Phil Salt. After being 4 for 81 in the 12th over, the strikers were unable to find any acceleration and lost by 38 runs. Australian surfer Tyler Wright has made history by taking out the Maui Pro. Wright beat local favourite Carissa Moore in the final after victory over compatriot Sally Fitzgibbon in the semis. It's the first time contenders on the women's tour have surfed the famous Hawaiian pipeline.
I also want to say thank you to WSL for giving us the opportunity to surf our pipe, to make history, and, you know, I definitely don't take this for granted.
Wright is now top of the WSL Tour rankings. Heavy rains in Central Australia are changing the typically dry landscape. As Samantha Johnshaw reports, parts of the Todd River are flowing in Alice Springs.
Alice Springs isn't famous for its beaches, but for the first time this summer, residents are making the most of the closest thing they have.
Is it a bit of fun?
Yeah.
Alice Springs received almost 35 millimetres of rain overnight, and almost 50 millimetres fell north of the town around Bond Springs, helping the typically dry riverbed fill up. The water didn't make it all the way to the gap, but in parts of the catchment, it rose to 91 centimetres and up to 20 centimetres through the town.
Sort of a bit muddy.
But the torrent still put some river crossings underwater and brought out plenty of curious locals for a splash and a look around.
I think it's absolutely amazing that this dry land is just replenished with so much water.
Great, because this doesn't usually happen. This is like a once-a-year experience. I'm not allowed to swim in the water because I might get some of my eyes and it stings.
The Bureau of Meteorology says Central Australia's wet conditions are expected to ease after Sunday night's downpour, and it's forecasting more rain for the region on Wednesday. Samantha Johnshaw, ABC News, Alice Springs.
And time for the weather now, and tonight's viewer pick taken in Alice Springs was sent in by Michael Robinson. Rain and storms continued across the territory today with heavy falls in the south. It was a cool and cloudy day in Darwin, reaching a top of 32 degrees in the city. It was unseasonably cold and wet in the centre. Today's top of 23 degrees in Alice Springs is more than 10 degrees below average for this time of the year. The Simpson district got the most rain overnight, and there was good rainfall in northeast Arnhem Land. Earlier today, heavy falls continued in the south, with good rainfall extending to much of the NT. Around Australia today, Sydney reached a top of 25 degrees, 21 in Adelaide, warm in Brisbane, 31. On the satellite, there's a thick blanket of cloud across WA and the Northern Territory, and a monsoon trough is generating storms across the far north. A tropical low over the Kimberley is moving towards the Territory's western border, and the system will dump heavy rain as it moves across this week. Interstate tomorrow, rain dominates the continent, a top of 29 degrees for Sydney, storms in Melbourne 19 and sunny in the west. To our north, cloud building in Jakarta, rain in Dili and stormy weather again in Port Moresby. Back home, cold and wet again in the south with below average temperatures throughout, a top of just 21 for Alice Springs and 27 in Tennant Creek. The mercury will also stay down across the north with rain and storms likely across the top end tomorrow. Up top, it'll be a cool and wet lead up to Christmas, 31 the top for Darwin and Wadeye, 30 in Jabiru. A strong wind warning is in place for the Beagle Bonaparte coast. There's still a flood watch in place for inland parts of the territory as that tropical low moves across, and heavy rainfall and damaging winds is likely in the south tonight with falls of up to 150 millimetres possible in the Tanami. There'll be a 5 metre high tide just after 11 a.m. with monsoonal northwesterly winds across coastal waters. The sun will be up tomorrow at 18 minutes past 6 and sunset will be around 10 past 7. And the outlook for Darwin this week, monsoonal weather continuing, easing slightly midweek in Alice Springs, rain continuing till Thursday and temperatures staying well below average all week. And to stay up to date with the latest news from the Northern Territory, head to our website, news.abc.net.au. And that's ABC News for this Monday night. Thank you for your company. Good night.